Ms. Green, thanks for coming in. I'm here today to give you an overview of the process, what you are facing, and help give you as much information as I can to help you make a decision about what to do with your case. So you are facing a charge of operating under the influence of alcohol, and there are certain things that the state has to prove in order to find you guilty, and there are certain rights that you have that you should be aware of to help you make a decision about what to do about your case.
Okay.
I understand that this can be difficult and confusing and that it can make you nervous, so I'm here to help you to try to get through it.
Okay.
All right, so the charge...
I hope so.
All right, well, we'll manage. So the charge that you have is operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of intoxicating liquor. The penalty for this charge is a maximum of 2.5 years in jail, but the majority of people who have this charge get probation if they are convicted.
This is my first offense. I've never done anything like this before.
Right.
Never happened before.
And so since you have no record, and because this is a first offense, and because nobody was hurt, it is very unlikely that any judge would send you to jail for this, even after a trial. The typical first offense disposition is a year of probation. You have to do 40 hours of classroom work. It's called the Driver Alcohol Education Program. And you have to pay some fines and fees. And if you successfully complete your probation, then you don't have to worry about any other consequences.
I don't really understand what that 40 hours is for. Are you talking about community service? Are you talking about 40 hours of driver's ed, or?
So the Driver Alcohol Education Program is a program that's run in your local community where you sit in a classroom and you learn about things like the importance of safe driving, the effects of alcohol on driving, how it makes you drive unsafely, and things like that. And that's only if you are convicted.
Okay.
So right now, you have the presumption of innocence, which means you are innocent until proven guilty by a judge or a jury. And so unless you change your plea from not guilty to guilty, or unless you go to trial and lose and you are found not guilty, you remain innocent.
So what does that mean we're going to decide now, like before we go to court? The interpreter needs to clarify. So we're going to decide the plea?
Well, you have a choice of pleading guilty or electing to go to trial.
What would be involved in going to trial?
So at a trial, you could have a trial in front of a judge or a trial in front of a jury.
And do I get to choose?
Yes. The jury would consist of 6 people that you would help to choose from the community. And at the end of the trial, those 6 jurors sit in a room and deliberate, and they have to find unanimously whether you are guilty or not guilty.
That could take a long time. If one person says that I'm guilty and the rest say I'm not guilty, then they're going to have to deliberate for a long time. Am I right?
Yeah, it could take a day. It could take more than a day. And then if after a certain point in time the jurors can't agree, then the judge can declare a mistrial.
And then what?
Then the district attorney's office has the right to proceed with another trial against you.
How long is this going to take? I mean, life is short.
I understand. But it's better to make sure that your rights are protected than to hurry through and make a rash decision.
We definitely agree on that.
Okay, well, it sounds like you understand what a unanimous jury decision is, so I'm going to move on from there. All right,
Okay.
so at this trial, the state would have to put on evidence against you. And they would present live testimony from the police officer, the state trooper who arrested you. And it looks like in this case that would be their only witness. And then
Could you just clarify me? Are you talking about the police officer witnessing what I did, or are you talking about another person who witnessed what went on between the police officer and I?
well, the police officer is the one who witnessed what you did, and there were no other witnesses, so the police officer would be the one to testify.
So it's his word against mine.
In
And
a
it's
way,
a dark road somewhere, and so it's his word against mine. Like, what are the chances, you know?
well, in a way, it is his word against yours, but you have to keep in mind that you don't have to testify. Because under the Fifth Amendment of our Constitution, you have the right to remain silent. And that includes at trial. And if you choose a jury trial, the jurors can make no adverse inference against you if you choose not to take the stand and testify.
So if I don't testify, then how do I get my side of the story out in front of the jurors? Would it be something you would videotape me telling my story ahead of time and play that? Like, how do I get what I want to say out there?
Well, you may decide that you want to testify, and so we would prepare for that. But you videotaping yourself, that wouldn't be admissible at trial because it would be considered hearsay or inadmissible hearsay. And if we present testimony, then the prosecution has a right to cross-examine that particular witness.
But that's only if I testify, right?
That's right.
So what would be the consequences if I decide not to testify?
Well, we'll talk about that because there are other ways to make our points in the case without presenting testimony. And that is through cross-examining the state trooper. So in these kinds of cases, we call them OUI cases. OUI is the acronym for operating under the influence. And so in these kinds of cases, they're very technical, and the state has to convince the jury that while you were driving, that your ability to drive safely was somehow diminished by your consumption of alcohol. And so in this case, you refuse the breathalyzer, so they don't have the evidence of your blood alcohol concentration to prove their case. And there are two ways they could do that. If they had blood alcohol, they could prove that you were either driving while you were 0.08 blood alcohol, 0.08% blood alcohol concentration or above, or that your ability to drive safely was diminished by your consumption of alcohol.
So how are they going to prove it if I didn't take the breathalyzer? There's no proof.
Well, they have circumstantial evidence based on how you were driving, certain things that you did or didn't do while you were interacting with the police officer, your the physical observations the trooper made of you, and how you did on certain tests. And that through that evidence, they will ask the jury or the judge to make inferences, and the inference being that you manifested these symptoms and you performed a certain way because you had consumed too much alcohol.
Do you have a copy of that report from when the officer was giving me the field sobriety tests and all
I
of
do.
that?
I have it right here. So we'll go over the report, and then as we go over the report, I'll explain the significance of certain things and how that could be used at trial, either for us or against us. All right, you ready?
So you do have the report, right? I'm just double checking.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so on February 16th of 2017, the state trooper was on Route 90 on the Massachusetts Turnpike. While he was heading westbound, he noticed in his rearview mirror that somebody was coming up on him with no headlights on. This was as the trooper was approaching the I-91 interchange. He saw a yellow Volkswagen. It was a convertible, and he says it was at a high speed approaching the exit ramp for I-91 North. But he didn't give you a speeding citation, and it's difficult to see how he could have measured whether or not you were actually speeding. So the trooper slowed down and changed lanes to let you get in front of him, and then he started to follow you. The trooper noticed that your front right parking light was not working correctly at that point. I don't know whether the parking lights actually are on all the time or if they're only on when the car is parked. So that's something I'm going to have to look into to see whether that makes sense.
I'm sorry, I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know.
Right. Sure.
And it's normal to have problems with an older car, right? You know, it's a deal.
Yes, but even older cars are required to pass inspection, and in order to pass inspection, you have to have all the lights functioning properly.
Yeah, I understand that, of course. You know, but sometimes they go off, they can go off when you're driving. I mean, the fuse can go out and there's nothing you can do about it. The lights could go out in here right now. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. What's the difference?
I understand. After you got your car back from the pound, did you have it looked at by a mechanic?
No, they didn't tell me nothing like that.
Okay.
They just told me I got my car back.
Did you get are the headlights working now?
Well, I don't have the car.
Oh, okay.
It's actually still in impound.
Oh,
That was an
okay.
interpreter error. The car is still in impound.
All right. Well,
Impound.
now the trooper put a 24-hour hold on it, which wasn't correct, but you should be able to pick up your car at any time.
They didn't let me know that. They should have let me know. You know, that's their job. I've got family, I've got work to do and everything else. I need that job, I need that car rather, and I couldn't communicate or anything like that. They didn't have an interpreter when they pulled me over, so there was no communication going on.
Okay, no, I understand that, and I see where the trooper wrote in his report that he didn't get you a sign language interpreter. But you should know that you can get your car now, and the first thing you should do is make sure that all the lights are working properly. And if they're not, then let me know because we can incorporate that into our defense.
Perfect, I'll let you know.
Make sure that whoever you take it to writes down a detailed report.
Do they just make a report and then give that, sign it and give it to me, or is there some kind of paperwork that I have to take to them to have them fill it out?
Well, mechanics don't usually write reports or detailed reports, so if you could just ask him to write a note as to whether the lights were functioning and whether any repairs were made. And even better, you should have the person at the impound lot watch you while you turn the headlights on, just to make sure that we have that person as a witness so that they can't say that you messed around with the lights after you took it out of the impound. And if you have a friend who can sign and speak, maybe you should take them too, just to help you communicate with the impound lot.
No.
Okay.
My friends are going to be biased. I need a certified interpreter. My friends are going to be biased. This is my life we're talking about, and I don't want any bias in there. So, no, I need a certified interpreter for that. And you know, the police told me the same thing. I told them I needed an interpreter. I asked for an interpreter. I told them I needed an interpreter. I asked for an interpreter. They told me they didn't provide one for a traffic stop. Then they take me down to the sheriff's building and I say, hey, I need an interpreter. They tell me to get a friend. I asked for a certified interpreter. They're like, call someone. Get a friend in here to do this.
I understand it's very distressing when your rights are abrogated and they don't provide you with a certified sign language interpreter. And so oftentimes police officers might have difficulty getting a sign language interpreter, even if they actually tried to do it because of the time. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And so we just have to work with what we have right now and help prepare for our defense as best as we can.
Two a.m.
Yes. I'm
police
sorry.
station?
I'm sorry, 9 p.m.
Oh, okay.
My
But still, that's
mistake.
kind of early. It's okay. It's all right.
All right, and I'll go into the whole request for the interpreter thing later when we get to it in the report.
It's really important information. I didn't have any communication access or anything. It's not like I'm an expert lip reader. I've got some skills at it. But a lot of, words look exactly the same on their lips. And it was very, very hard to see. He's got a light shining in my eyes. The lights are going off on the police car. I couldn't see him very well.
Okay.
So I'm afraid that, things aren't going to be clear when you're talking and I'm saying stuff to other people that's just not going to be clear.
I understand. I've had deaf clients before, and I understand the importance of having a certified sign language interpreter so that you can understand what's going on. And I think the best way to go forward now is to get into the very specifics of the police report, and then we'll apply those principles as we go over the facts.
Okay.
Because the most important thing right now is for you to decide how to proceed with your case, and as we get through the facts, that will become clear. All right. So after the trooper saw you in his rear view, pulled over and let you pass, he started following you for a while. And this trooper saw you turn onto Route 91, and that exchange is really complicated because you have to go through a series of loops, and then at a certain point you go on a road that connects 90 to 91 before you actually get onto 91.
Yeah, it is complicated.
Yes. And so if you look at a map over here, you're heading west on 90 over here, and then you get off at exit 4, and then you go up here, and then eventually you go up this road that connects you to 91 North. And that's the route that you took. While you were on that connecting road, the trooper noticed, he called it the exit ramp. He said that you went over the fog line, according to this photograph that the trooper took. That white line right there on the right-hand side is what they call the fog line. So the reason that the trooper wrote about that is because he's trying to demonstrate all the different ways in which he believed that you were driving erratically.
So really, this is pretty much his opinion, right? And it's that white line there. Look how close it is to the curb. If I had hit that line, I would have flipped my car and gone over the guardrail.
It is very close to the curb, and you're right. And so the significance of you going over that line, which is less than a foot from the curb, I think the jury is going to take a look at that and say, that's not that big a deal. But they have to look at all of the stuff added up, all of the details added up before they make their decision. And so we'll cover this, and then we'll move on to the other details in the report.
You know, I know that it would be important to the police officer, and it's definitely important to this case, but I mean, if you look like that at that, I don't see how that's even possible. And I have another concern too. If you look at this, there's no lights. If you look at this, there's no lights on the road. So how could I have been driving down there? It would have been pitch black. And if it was pitch black, I didn't have my lights on, I wouldn't be alive today because there's no way I would have been able to see where I was going.
You're right to make note of that, and I noticed the same thing. So at the end of my summary of the police report, I'll talk about all those different things and how they add up.
Okay.
I have to get to court in half an hour, so maybe let me get through this report and so that we can talk about what your options are.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, great. And so there was that thing that the trooper noticed. The trooper also noticed that the headlights were off. So if there was no mechanical problem with the car, they're going to try to argue in court that that is another example of your impairment because you forgot to turn the headlights on. All right, and so before the trooper noted that you went over.
How is that any kind of proof that I was drunk? People who aren't impaired sometimes forget to turn their headlights on.
That might be true. And again, I'm going to go over how all those things add up after I get through the report. So I just ask you to let me get through this, and then that'll make our meeting more effective.
Okay, good.
All right. So the other thing that the trooper noticed was that that you stopped a few hundred feet from the exit ramp and then veered onto I-91 North without using a turn signal. So what he's talking about, if you look at this Google Maps image, After you get all the way up here, and then you could either go 91 south or 91 north, you stopped for a little bit, and then you turned on to 91 without using your right directional. So it can be confusing because sometimes you don't know which lane to be in until the last minute as you approach that left turn option or right turn option.
That's true. That's definitely true.
Right. And so, but then what's going to come into play is, where you live, how long how many years you've been driving that road, how familiar you are with it, and all of those things. Because if you're very familiar with the road and then you're stopping like that, then they're going to say that that's just evidence of impairment, not the confusing roadway. All right, so then the trooper noted, and also if you didn't use your directional, maybe you were confused and maybe you saw the trooper behind you, so you were nervous, but failing to use that right turn directional, they're going to say was additional evidence of impairment. So then we're going to have to try to remember all the things that you did right, not just the things that you did wrong. Because after following you all that way, he noted a couple of things that you did wrong, but maybe there were more things that you did right. The trooper noted that you started to veer right as if you were going to go on Route 5, but then you suddenly turned and veered left across 2 lanes, also without using a turn signal, to stay on the road to take 91 north. Now, where the trooper pulled you over, all of this stuff was going on in the road between 90 and 91, which loops up this way and then goes all the way up here. But the trooper says he pulls you over on the Ingleside exit, which is all the way up here. So it looks like there's just about a mile in which the trooper is following you, and he doesn't say anything in his report about you doing anything wrong during that distance.
That allowed?
To follow you?
Yeah, just to keep following me, following me, following me, following me. Are they allowed to do that?
Sadly, yes, they are allowed to do that because it's a public way, and as long as they're not pulling you over with lack of reasonable suspicion or probable cause, then the troopers are allowed to go wherever they want on the public ways. All right, so you take the Ingleside exit over here, and the trooper took a photograph of that area where he decided that he was going to pull you over. So on the off-ramp from 91 at the Ingleside exit, he supposedly flashed his overhead lights, and you pulled over. But he says that you pulled over, instead of pulling over to the right, you pulled over to the left. And you pulled over on this grassy median that's in this picture over here at a 45-degree angle.
Well, I was nervous.
Yeah. And
I was trying to stop as fast as possible. It was a cop. I was really nervous. My heart was racing.
no, I understand. And so it also makes sense to me why, all right, so the trooper used his overhead lights on 91, then you exited, and then you went down the off-ramp and onto the grassy median. So they're going to say in court that because you didn't pull over right away on 91, that's another sign of impairment. But we're going to say that you were actually looking for the nearest safe place for you to park at, because he happened to shine his overhead lights right before that exit, and you were getting off that exit anyway. So instead of pulling over right in the middle of the off-ramp, you decided to find the nearest place where you could pull over safely.
We have to pull over to a safe place. We have to be able to pull over to a safe place. If we don't, a further accident could happen. Somebody could get hurt. So I'm in greater trouble because I pulled over and found a safe place to pull over. That's used against me?
I'm simply trying to anticipate the arguments that the district attorney is going to make at trial. So the trooper didn't write anything in the report about how that took too long, but based on my experience, that's often what the prosecutors try to do at trial. All right, so they're saying that you lurched back and forth a couple of times until you finally turned the car's engine off. When the trooper approached you, the trooper noted that you had red, bloodshot, and watery eyes. He would probably...
That could be just because I was emotional.
Well, that's true. There are all kinds of reasons why somebody's eyes could be red or bloodshot or watery. But the trooper is going to testify that he went to the academy, and at the academy there were test subjects who drank alcohol, and slowly they noted how their eyes became red and bloodshot, and they're going to try to focus on how this is alcohol related. All right, and just real quick, the police report says that he asked you for your driver's license and registration, that you pulled out a bunch of cards from your pocketbook, that you skipped over your license right away, and then you ignored the request for the registration at first, so he had to ask you for the registration again, and then you were able to produce it from the glove compartment. They're going to say that's another sign of alcohol impairment because your thinking was slow and confused. And then when he had you do field sobriety tests, he's going to say that these are divided attention tests that are designed to look for how well you pay attention, how well you're able to think, as well as your motor coordination. Those two things that they're trained to observe as they're doing their encounter with you. So he noted that there was an odor of alcohol on your breath, but you explained, according to him, that you had 2 drinks. But it's not at all clear whether, when you held up 2 fingers, that you understood his question or that you were actually saying that you had 2 drinks.
Well, I had the lights going on, everything was flashing and everything else and all of that. I mean, I couldn't even see clearly. I don't remember telling him that I had 2 drinks.
What does 2 fingers mean in American Sign Language?
Peace.
Okay.
Peace. You know, it can also be the number 2, yeah.
All right. Do you remember doing that?
I mean, it can be anything.
Is your memory from that night not so great?
In the moment, I was really nervous, so I don't exactly remember. Overall, my memory of the evening is really good. Some of the details, no, I don't have. And with a lot of it, I didn't have an interpreter to be able to give you those details. The whole thing was a real challenge. He could have said something that I just really didn't understand clearly. I mean, when he came and he arrested me, I just may not have understood what he was saying.
Okay. And, you know, that's possible also, but there are going to be some things that can be attributable to the lack of an interpreter and some things that are not. And so we need to be able to distinguish between those two to see how strong a defense we have.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, so I've got 5 minutes till court, so I'm just going to cover the rest of this real quick, okay? All right, so he gave you 2 field sobriety tests that would be admissible at trial and another one that is inadmissible. The horizontal gaze nystagmus is not admissible at trial because the science hasn't been proven. But when he gave you that test, he noted you were swaying forward and backward significantly during that test, at least 3 inches in both directions, and he's going to testify that that's a sign of impairment. So he can actually use that part at trial without getting into the nystagmus part. All right, and sometimes people just sway a little bit even when they're totally sober. So, you know, I don't know if that's that big of a deal. All right.
And I'm one of those people that has lousy balance, you know? I will sway back and forth. And I'm sober right now, so I think that that is important.
Well, oftentimes deaf people might have some problems with their inner ear, which affects balance.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely
Okay.
can influence.
You did the 9-step walk and turn, but you counted out 10 steps at one point and walked 10 steps, and you counted out 9 steps and walked 10 steps on the way back, which they're going to say because you counted out the wrong number of steps, that was a sign of impairment because you didn't follow instructions. And on the one leg stand, you started before he told you to start the test, and you put your foot down on 1006 and 1009 and skipped 1017. But otherwise, you made it to 30 seconds just by putting your foot down on those 2 occasions, and you skipped the number. So overall, it's not the worst performance on the test, but skipping the number is kind of more significant in my opinion because it shows that you couldn't count, which is something you would ordinarily be able to do.
How does he know how I count normally?
Well, he doesn't, but I mean, if you graduated high school and you got through a year of college before dropping out, then maybe they could ask the jury to draw an inference that you know how to count from 1/1000 to 31,000.
What does my education have to do with it? The point is, I count using my hands in sign language. How would he know if I missed a number?
Oh, well, the way it sounded in the report is though you were counting out loud. If he weren't counting out loud and he's just guessing at you counting, then you make a very good point, and we could definitely use that against him at trial.
Okay?
So when I cross-examine this trooper at trial, I'm going to go over all this stuff. Well, you've never met my client before. You don't know how she typically communicates. You don't know what it is for her to count. And I would ask him to explain exactly how he was able to infer that you skipped the number 17. And if he's just guessing, then that's going to look bad for them.
You may also want to ask him if he's familiar with the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. I think it's important.
Well, I certainly will ask him about why he didn't honor your request to get a certified interpreter.
He told me to call a friend.
Well, obviously that's not good enough because you need somebody that's certified, and we could go over the guidelines for deaf interpreters to make that point in court. Okay, so
Deaf interpreters? I don't understand.
I'm sorry, American Sign Language interpreters.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
All right, and so just to wrap up, now this is the evidence that they would have against you. When you refuse the breathalyzer test, none of that comes out at trial. They can't talk about the fact that they offered you and that you refused, because in Massachusetts you have the absolute right to refuse, and the courts have held that that refusal is inadmissible at trial. So when you decide whether to go to trial or not, keep that in mind. But also keep in mind the fact that they've got you driving without headlights at night in the wintertime in February, that you went across 2 lanes without using a directional, that you took a right turn onto 91 without using a directional, that you stopped short of the turn onto at the off-ramp, and that you had an odor of alcohol on your breath, that your eyes were bloodshot, and that you were swaying while you were doing the field sobriety tests. Now, when I cross-examine the trooper, we could do a lot with that to try to show that they haven't sustained their burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that your ability to drive safely was diminished by your consumption of alcohol.
Okay.
You should also know that the difference in what you would get for a sentence after trial and before trial is not significant. So if you decide you want to go to trial, it's very unlikely that they would send you to jail in this case. But either way, you would have to do the driver alcohol education program, be on probation for 1 year, pay about $600 in fines, pay $65 a month while you're on probation, and pay $870-something for the driver alcohol education program. So in some sense, it might be worth it just to go to trial, because the outcome would be the same if you pleaded guilty. But if you go to trial and win, you don't have to do any of that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Think about that, and we'll meet again.
And when do I have to have a decision? Like, when are we going to sit down again?
Well, we have a pretrial hearing in 3 weeks, and we can meet anytime before then. You should also know that with your refusal to take the breathalyzer, they suspended your license for 180 days. So just make sure that you don't drive, but also know that that was a week ago. So also know that you have a right to appeal that refusal because they didn't give you the interpreter. And so you can apply for a hearing, and I'll give you the form right now, and you can go to Boston and have a hearing on whether or not this was actually an informed refusal.
You told me to go get my car checked, to have it, take it to a mechanic, to get it out of impound, and to do all that stuff. Now you're informing me that my license is suspended, so I can't do that. Well, what is it you want me to do? I mean, how am I supposed to drive it there?
You have to get a friend to drive it for you. I'm sorry, I have to go.
That's all right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your help, and I look forward to our next meeting. I'm ready to get this over and done with.
You're welcome. We'll talk about your decision later.
Thank you.
All right.